Right. So I'm not really into editing software quite yet, so you're just going to have to use your imagination. I do have a picture I'm going to post, but I had peas growing up these tomato cages. And so the idea was I planted the peas in the spring, and then the peas would climb up the tomato cages, and then I transplanted the tomatoes into the middle in about late April. So the idea was the tomatoes get nice and established, and then the peas come up. I harvest some peas, I cut them at the root, and then they fix nitrogen into the soil. They use the cage while the tomatoes aren't using the cage. And, then I get 2 crops out of a relatively small space. So here's been the reality of that experiment. So I got some peas. I harvested about that much the other day. And that's about my total harvest from these plants. So, I mean, I guess that's a pretty fair bit. I really don't grow peas too much, so I like that amount. That's good for me. Here's pretty much all the debris I've cleaned out. It's a mixture of weeds, radish top, and pea tendrils. Down here, you can see some radishes I left in the ground. Now, I left them in the ground. I cut the greens off the top, and I left them in the ground to rot, so that they will decompose. The worms and soil microbes and everything like that will completely devour them, and they'll leave a big gap of just, nutrient-rich, awesome compost. Where you see all this bare soil, I'm going to run over this shit with a lawnmower, and I'm going to mulch with it. Now, here's the part of the experiment that wasn't so good. Everything kind of turned out the way I wanted to. The tomatoes look okay. Like this guy, he's put on a couple, can't really see him. He's put on a couple tomatoes, and, this guy's put on a couple tomatoes. But they're kind of leggy, and they're kind of small. And especially, excuse me, buddy. Especially this one. Now, this one is actually not rooted very well. You can see, hold on. I'll put that down for a second. You can see here, this is the original tomato plant. Sorry. This is the original tomato plant here. It's in the ground. When I tried to move it, it snapped in half. So I have gone ahead and just put that half in the ground, hoping it will reroot. So this thing was pretty leggy. It was about up to here, and it was as thin as this. Now, what's also funny, and totally not intentional, and I really don't even know how this happened, here, the peas went largest, medium, small, and so the opposite has happened with the tomatoes. The tomato on this side was larger, about medium, and the smallest and the leggiest here. As opposed to, coming down the line here, as opposed to these tomatoes. Now they're the same varieties. This is a yellow cherry and this is a Roma, and I have one Roma and a yellow cherry on each side over there, and these are substantially more bushy, definitely filling in the thing. They're kind of monsters. They're starting to put on a few tomatoes. So yeah, so that's been the experiment. I'm glad I did it. I'm really happy that I tried it out. As Joe Salatin said, anything worth doing is worth doing wrong. I learned a lot. I could tweak the experiment and make it work a little better, or I could just abandon the idea. And yeah, so that was my pea and tomato experiment. I think those tomatoes over there will still be fine. They're probably just a couple weeks behind what these ones are. I think now that they're going to get more sun and have a good bit of mulch in the bottom, they're really going to bush up and do really well, especially in the next month. So there's the garden.